Do you know what caused the first mass extinction, the Great Oxygenation Event? As suggested by its name, the Great Oxygenation Event is not caused by global warming or asteroids, but by too much oxygen created by photosynthetic cyanobacteria. This process killed off anywhere from 80 to 99.5% of the mainly anaerobic inhabitants of Earth. As organisms adapted to the new atmospheric composition, photosynthesis proved responsible for the rise of metabolism by cellular respiration and the eventual evolution of multicellularity.
Wow, I didn't know that the Great Oxygenation Event caused a great extinction. So how did plant cells gain their ability for photosynthesis?
The answer lies in an ancient interaction between a eukaryote and a cyanobacterium. The endosymbiotic theory explains that chloroplasts originated from an ancient cyanobacterial cell that an early eukaryotic cell ingested. It survived within the eukaryote and developed a symbiotic relationship with it. Evidence for this theory is that chloroplasts have double membranes, independent circular DNA, and ribosomes that make them resemble a reduced prokaryotic cell.
Now I know the evolution of photosynthetic organisms. But how exactly do they create carbohydrates by using only sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water?
They do so through the two stages of light reactions, which happen in the thylakoid of plant chloroplasts, and the Calvin cycle, which occurs in the stroma. First, the light reaction. A photosystem is made of a reaction center complex, containing a special pair of chlorophyll A molecules called P680 and a primary electron acceptor, and a light harvesting complex consisting of many pigments bound to proteins. When a photon of light strikes one of the pigment molecules in PS2 or photosystem 2, its electron is excited to a higher energy level. As the electron falls back to its ground state, it also releases a photon that excites another nearby pigment. The energy is relayed between pigments until reaching the reaction center complex, where the pair of P680 is excited. This electron is transferred to the primary electron acceptor, and the P680 is now missing its negative charge and becomes P680+. An enzyme splits water into two electrons, two hydrogen ions, and an oxygen atom. The two electrons replace the electrons transferred to the primary electron acceptor. The hydrogen ions are released into the thylakoid inside the chloroplasts, and the oxygen combines with another oxygen generated by the splitting of another water molecule to form O2. PS1, or photosystem 1, and PS2 are both embedded in the thylakoid membrane that separates the thylakoid from the stroma. As electrons pass from PS2 to PS1 through carriers that progressively have a higher affinity for electrons, the ETC pumps hydrogen ions into the thylakoid space. Redox, the gaining or losing of electrons energy, is transferred to potential energy stored in the form of a hydrogen-proton gradient. ATP synthase complex then couples the diffusion of hydrogen ions down their concentration gradient to the phosphorylation of ADP, forming ATP. Light energy is harvested similarly in PS1 as to PS2, except the pigments ultimately excite an electron of the P700 pair of chlorophyll A molecules. Photo-excited electrons pass from PS1 down a second ETC that does not create a proton gradient and thus does not produce ATP. NADP+ is the final electron acceptor and joins with two electrons and a hydrogen ion to form NADPH. The electrons in NADPH are at a higher energy level than they are originally in water, so they are more readily available for the Calvin cycle. Overall, the light energy converts solar energy to chemical energy of ATP and NADPH to be used in the Calvin cycle, with oxygen as a byproduct. Next, the Calvin cycle. The Calvin cycle must take place 3 times for the next synthesis of one molecule of G3P. The enzyme Rubisco incorporates CO2 into a 5-carbon sugar called RUBP. The energetically unstable product is immediately split in half, forming 2 molecules of PGA. Rubisco is one of the most abundant proteins in the biosphere, accounting for approximately 30 to 50% of all soluble leaf proteins in plants. Its sheer amount highlights its significance. The reaction Rubisco catalyzes essentially fixes inorganic carbon from the atmosphere into organic molecules, providing the foundation for all life on Earth. Each molecule of PGA undergoes a complicated process using ATP and NADPH to finally form G3P. For every 3 molecules of CO2 that enter the cycle, 6 molecules of G3P are produced, but only 1 is counted as net gain. You might also notice that G3P but not glucose is produced, which differs from the simplistic photosynthesis formula. This is because G3P is not only a precursor to glucose, but also a versatile molecule that is used in metabolic pathways to produce other organic molecules, such as amino acids, lipids, and nucleotides. The carbon skeleton of the remaining 5 G3P molecules are rearranged into 3 molecules of RUBP using 3 ATP molecules. The cycle is complete, and the RUBP is prepared to receive CO2 again. Overall, the Calvin cycle builds carbohydrates from carbon that enter in the form of CO2 using ATP and NADPH produced in the light reaction.
It is clear to me now that photosynthesis is an emergent property of the chloroplast, which integrates the light reaction and Calvin cycle to make carbohydrates. What is the broader impact of photosynthesis on Earth?
Photosynthetic organisms are the primary producers that form the base of Earth's food webs that convert light energy to usable chemical energy to be consumed by all higher life forms. They also produce almost all oxygen in the atmosphere that most organisms depend on for cellular respiration. Photosynthesis carried out by ancient plants removes carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and stores it in organic matter as fossil fuels. Humans harness those fossil fuels to power cities and as raw materials for plastic and other synthetic products. However, in contrast with the great oxygenation event 2 billion years ago, the Earth is now in the way of a great carbon dioxidation event due to the overuse of fossil fuels. The climate change that results causes permafrost, the permanently frozen ground that locks greenhouse gases, to melt, releasing even more CO2 into the atmosphere and exacerbating global warming. This temperature rise has an impact as significant as the rise in oxygen levels during the Great Oxygenation Event, leading to the demise of coral ecosystems, mass extinctions of species, and posing a threat to coastal cities with rising sea levels. You can help mitigate global warming by reducing dependence on plastic, which is derived from fossil fuels, and by adopting renewable energy sources, such as driving electric cars. This not only saves large oceanic organisms, but also allows countless photosynthetic phytoplankton, too small to see with the human eye, to continue producing at least 50% of all the oxygen on Earth. Thank you.